With us now, and he is such a great favorite, is the publisher of TrendsJournal, Gerald Celente. TrendsJournal.com is where you'll find it. And I received the TrendsJournal, and I tell you, it is great reading. I look forward to them. And I'm not getting paid to say this. I'm just saying it because it's true. I look forward to it. So much of what Gerald Celente says comes true, is in fact just exactly what happens. And he does it in a way that I really enjoy, because the last thing Gerald Celente is politically correct. And that is what so many of you, our listeners, enjoy about him. Because, Gerald, I tell you, it's great to have you back. And each time you end a segment with me, it takes about 3 seconds for emails to arrive saying, when are you having him back?
Thank you. That's very nice of you. I appreciate it.
So, top trends and top 10 trends for 2014. First of all, how do you decide what makes your top 10 list for a coming year?
Well, the way we really decide is how much impact it's going to have on the general population, society as a whole. So we really try to pick them like that. You know, it's not like with most others, you know, it doesn't have to do with, you know, what people are going to be wearing, what they're going to be eating, what they're going to be drinking, or that kind of thing. It's really, as I mentioned in this one, Roy, I've been at this for 33 years, and I've never seen a year coming on like the one we're moving into, or as you mentioned, how quickly this one passed by. You look at the stats and the polls in the states, and the people are glad it's gone. And you wouldn't think it was that bad, but as it's affecting everyday life, you can see that it's had quite an impact, 2013, on a lot of the people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you the first item that you have, the first one I read, was March Economic Madness. And you start by pointing out, and you're absolutely correct, that you predicted the crash of 87, the 1997 Asian currency crisis, and the panic of 2008. And you registered that term on as a domain name in 2007, but you missed with the crash of 2010. And tell us why that was.
I had absolutely no idea that the Federal Reserve was dumping into the system tens of trillions of dollars, and that's the real number, by the way. It's over $17 trillion, beyond the quantitative easing, which they made that one up as well. That was a new term that nobody ever heard of before. And the only reason we know that number was because of one-time forced reporting when Ron Paul was a representative in the House, and they made him report at one time. So you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, these schemes undreamed of. I had no idea that they would make up a term in the European Central Bank called LTRO. Yeah, how about that? Long-term refinancing operations, which essentially means if the banks need money, we're going to give it you all you need. Don't worry about paying us back. We'll talk about it later. So you don't know what schemes undreamed of. You don't know. I didn't know. No one knew except the people that were doing it, that they were rigging the LIBOR rate, our interest rates. It only affects, and I'm not making this number up, about $700 trillion.
Oh, my.
And so now we know it's a fact. They rigged the LIBOR rates, the interest rates. Oh, by the way, no one went to jail for it. They never do. And now we've learned they're also rigging the Forex. That's the currency rates each day. And now they're looking into it. They're rigging, as we all know, the gold funds as well. So you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know the dirty deals going on, and you don't know the inside deals going on. So we work with the information that we have.
And you're saying that March of this coming year is going to be a year which will, at least a month, which will feature an economic shock. I'm quoting here. An economic shock wave will rattle the world equity markets.
Well, here we go. They had this term called tapering, which means that the Federal Reserve is not going to buy up $80 billion a month worth, or $85 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities and treasuries. So they announced at the end of this year that they're going to be pulling back a bit. And now we're forecasting they're going to also pull back more in January. So here we are. We're on the phone today. What just happened? Well, the Treasury rates are now over 3% in the States. What does that mean? It means that interest rates are going up, and it's going to cost everybody more to borrow. It also means that in these countries like Indonesia and Brazil and the emerging markets, India, China, Russia, that all of that hot money that was flowing into these countries, it's not flowing in anymore. That all that cheap money that they invented through this term called quantitative easing, because they are now saying they cannot keep pumping it into the system. As we speak, a story that is not making the news, and that's what's going on in China, because China's doing the exact same thing. They're dumping trillions of yuan into the system. So what happened over the last several days that's not making the news? There's a credit crunch in China. That's right. The shadow banking system needs money to keep the Ponzi scheme going, and the government's cutting back on it. Interest rates spiked in a few days. Now the government is pumping more money in temporarily. What does that mean? Well, you see the value of the Chinese currency. It's at all-time highs right now. And just a few, 2 years ago, everyone was complaining that the Chinese were keeping their currency down artificially. So what we have, then we have a little thing going on in Turkey, and people really aren't paying much attention to it. Their lira, their currency, is at an all-time low against the dollar. Why? Because, well, it's not only the political problems going on, it's much bigger than that. They're calling it an interest rate crisis. Interest rates are going up. Roy, it all goes back to interest rates. Here in the States, you look like a nice guy. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You could use a new automobile. That's right. You don't have any money? Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
0% down, because you're that kind of guy. Oh, don't worry about interest. We're going to charge you? Hey, is 0 good enough for you? Now, I'm not making this up. Oh, you don't have any income verification? Call this number. We're going to find a dealer near you where you could get a car with no income verification, with no interest rates, and no money down. They're doing it.
Gerald, I want you to hold on, if you would. I have to take a break. I want to come back and cover some of the other aspects of your forecasting for 2014, because what this leading to is the next thing I want to talk to you about, which is in your forecasting that I have, the trends for 2014. You're right. Around the world, citizen distrust has turned into universal disdain for entrenched political parties whose draconian austerity measures and punishing economic policies have thrown millions into poverty and pushed millions of protesters into the streets. Civil wars, civil unrest, revolts, and revolutions will be just some of the cards dealt by an angry public that has lost everything and has nothing left to lose. More with Gerald Celente, TrendsJournal.com, when we come back. Gerald Celente is with us from TrendsJournal.com, and looking ahead to 2014. Now, Gerald, you've never been a great fan of the political leadership in your country or any country globally, and you've said so very directly, and you've also said that people generally have had enough, and we've seen some of it in the streets. You're predicting more of the same for 2014. Was the great wake-up call, as I read in the top 10 trends for 2014?
Look around the world. I mentioned what's going on in Turkey. Look what's going on in Ukraine. Take a trip over to Romania, Bulgaria, people out on the streets. You look at going on in Italy, the so-called pitchfork movement, nonstop. And now the police are saying they're not going to protect the politicians nor the institutions. You look at what's going on in Mexico with the people taking to the streets opposed to the privatization of their petrol industry. You look what's going on in Argentina, in Brazil. Go around the world, Roy, and you're seeing people taking to the streets. They're disgusted with the political systems that are enriching the few at the cost of everybody else. So we have never seen anything like this. Oh, I forgot about Greece and Spain and Portugal and on and on. We've never seen anything like this before. Oh, Thailand, how could I forget that one? So you keep looking around and you can see how the people are ready to throw out the bums, so to speak.
Are we going to see it? The global media, or at least the Western media, pays attention to what happens in the United States, what happens in Canada, what happens in Western Europe. You mentioned Spain. We've seen it in Spain. We've seen it in Greece. But that's almost become something that you're accustomed to. Are we going to see enough of it, do you think, in some of the more highly covered by Western media countries to really get attention, to get the attention of governments, get the attention of other people?
I think the big one's going to be in Italy. They're facing a real financial crisis. They can't get out of this thing at all. Their debt-to-GDP ratio is just about the highest, just beyond Greece's in the Eurozone. And then you're also, by the way, you're going to start seeing a lot of unrest starting to happen in France as well, as their recession continues to worsen and there's no way out. So the media is not going to be able to avoid it. Of course, they come up with stuff like, I never knew there was a Duck Dynasty. You know, all of a sudden this is news. But the people in the United States have no idea what's going on in Ukraine. You know, they only get bits and pieces of it. So they're going to be forced to cover it.
How is this going to affect the average person? How's it going to affect me? How's it going to affect you? How will it affect everybody listening to this program? How do these events that you're forecasting for 2014 affect us in our homes and affect our lives?
It all comes back to money. And that's the one I was going on about before, and that is that interest rates are going to go up. As wars continue, as social unrest continues, there's going to be less money for the people that don't have it already. And you're going to start seeing a lot of crises start to develop, because the only way they've kept this Ponzi scheme going is by dumping cheap money into the system. And now with the tapering that's taking hold already in the United States and in China, you're going to start seeing some real pullbacks. Take Canada, for example, a natural resource-rich exporting nation. If the Chinese aren't making and buying, well, the Canadians aren't exporting. Neither are the Australians and the Brazilians, the Chileans, the Bolivians, and on and on. And you can already see the slowdown. So that's how it really affects everyone. It's all tied together.
What happens, I'm looking at two of the examples of your trends for 2014. Boomer Renaissance arrives, the Boomer Renaissance arrives, and digital learning explodes.
You know, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. The baby boomers are in terrible shape, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. They're losing their jobs. And of course, with one of our trends, we call it Slavelandia, with being able to hire basically slave labor help, they're not paying boomers what they used to pay them. So now they're being forced to reinvent themselves. And they've been around long enough to know that they have skills and they have knowledge. And when you look at the plague, by the way, it was followed by the Renaissance after 60% of Europe was blown away through death. The same thing you're going to start seeing now. And by the way, when I talk about these protest movements and other things, you know, these aren't youth-generated. They're really coming down from the top. And so the boomers are going to be playing a very big role in recreating the future. And in tying into that one, as you mentioned, about the digital learning explodes, the boomers are going to take it to a whole nother level and beyond boomers, particularly in people going into retirement areas, and even in nursing homes. This may become something that starts to regenerate the brain and start to make it active again rather than it atrophying the way it is. I have a friend, Roy. His name is Stanley Blum. At 80 years old, he began to paint, write poetry, and write books. He's now 94, he and his wife, June, and all they do is keep creating more and more beauty. So there are positive aspects to this as well.
Is there an upside? Do you see a story that is going to be a positive one for everyone listening to this program now? Do you see a trend developing that we'll all be taking positively advantage of or able to?
I believe it's, the Stanley Blum story, he and June, and that is creating art and beauty and bringing the human spirit to a higher level. How can any self-respect, again, only speaking for myself, and as you point out, I'm a political atheist, how could any self-respecting human being look up to their political leaders in most of the countries? I mean, they range between sociopaths and psychopaths. And I'm not using those words as, to inflame people, only by their actions. Hey, let's blow out a wedding party in Yemen. So what? We killed 13. Don't you re-elect me? We're going to be out of Afghanistan by 2014. Well, I got a number wrong. We're going to make it 2024. And I could go on about Bush before that, about, having that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction ties to Al-Qaeda, I tell you. So what I'm saying is the upside is people are going to start looking within themselves rather than others to lead them. And when people start leading the way, I believe we're going to be led to a much higher level than we are now, rather than letting politicians and bureaucrats and other, quote, authorities lead the way.
All right. Gerald, it's always good talking to you. Thank you so much for the time today. I know you haven't been well recently, and hope you're feeling much better, and we'll talk to you again in 2014.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and Happy New Year to you and everyone listening.